You're listening to Should You Read It? Should You Read It is a weekly podcast that looks at books that can help business owners. I provide critiques and recommendations so that you don't have to wade through everything out there and can get back to running your business. Additionally, with each weekly book, we'll look at how it relates to other books in its field and what ideas cross over along all the books that I've read. Welcome to episode 9 of Should I Read It? Today we're going to look at High Performance Habits by Brendon Burchard. High Performance Habits is intended to be a research-backed look at what it takes for people to be great. It makes it actually very similar to Great at Work, which we looked at in episode 6. What is it that makes high performers high performers? What is it that puts them above the rest of us? I know you're asking that question because you want to see the same type of success or money or freedom that high performers you know have. And that's the purpose of High Performance Habits by Brendon Burchard. Burchard wants to expose what high performers do so that we can do it as well and increase our performance. Again, here's a quote from the book. This book is about how people become extraordinary and why others block themselves from possibility. It will show clearly and unmistakably why some excel, others fail, and far too many never even try. Now, there are 3 fundamental questions that Burchard tries to answer for us. 1. Why do some individuals and teams succeed more quickly than others and sustain that success over the long term? Number 2. Of those who pull it off, why are some miserable and others happy on their journey? And number 3, what motivates people to reach for higher levels of success in the first place, and what kinds of habits, training, and support help people improve faster? Now, Burchard also recognizes that we measure things, and we measure more, but then we still remain troubled. We remain in the state of clutter where we don't get good work done. He wants us to break through that. Here's a quote from Burchard. We've been sold this alluring vision of a world where new gadgets will make us smarter, faster, and better. But many of us are beginning to see the hype. Tools cannot replace wisdom. You can have all the gadgets in the world and dive deep into the quantified self movement where every step, second of sleep, beat of your heart, and moment of your day is tracked, scored, gamified. But a lot of people are connected and remain troubled. This harkens back to the idea of any benefit thinking as proposed by Cal Newport in Deep Work. Any benefit thinking is the idea that if there is any benefit at all to a tool, we'll use it regardless of the costs. Burchard echoes this as he acknowledges that we've been sold this vision of the future and more stuff and more things to measure because there is some benefit to measurement. We don't see much, but we keep clinging to the idea that there has to be some benefit. Now, before we can dive into the 6 things that Burchard found to help us explain why high performers are doing so well, we should get a handle on his definition of what high performance is. His definition of high performance is succeeding beyond standard norms consistently over the long term. Now that means this is not flash in the pan. High performance is sustained. Sustained performance that came again after some failure even. Performance that is relentless in the face of setbacks. Now note the part about failure I mentioned. High performers are not always successful. They do keep going though. They do embrace the hard times and endeavor to learn from them. Here's a quote from Burchard. Too many people avoid any sense of hardship in their lives. They fear they can't handle it or they'll be judged or rejected. But high performers are different. It's not that they lack any self-doubt at all. It's that they look forward to trying new things and they do believe in their abilities to figure things out. This actually reminds me a lot of Mark Manson and his contention that we've made any type of hardship into a pariah of experience. Here's a quote from Manson. Now here's a problem. Our society today, through the wonders of consumer culture and hey, look at my life is cooler than your social media, has bred a whole generation of people who believe that having these negative experiences, anxiety, fear, guilt, etc., is totally not okay. That's out of his book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a 4-letter word. And we'll keep that clean. You can find a link to that in the show notes. Now, while the understanding of what a high performance is and how it doesn't always mean success in every field, we can look at the High Performance 6, or the HP6 as Burchard calls them, which takes up the bulk of the rest of the book. These are the 6 habits that Burchard saw repeated as he examined the research on high performers. He also saw these items work for his coaching clients, refers to them later in the book as the HP6, which I've said. Now, Burchard's HP6 are 1. Seek clarity, 2. Generate energy, 3. Raise necessity, 4. Increase productivity, 5. Develop influence, and 6. Demonstrate courage. He claims that if you lack these things, even if you're hugely gifted and highly motivated, you'll see little long-term success. Here's a quote from Burchard. Without the HP6, even the most gifted person would be lost, tired, unmotivated, unproductive, alone, or fearful. Now, I can see this especially with the seeking clarity habit. Without clarity, you'll run all over doing many things and making little progress in one field. It doesn't matter how good you are if you never push on something long and hard enough to see it through to completion. Before we dive into the HP6, Burchard addresses being ready to become that high performer as well. If you're not ready to invest in the habits and make some sacrifices, then you're not ready for the HP6. One other division that Burchard makes is that the first 3 habits are personal habits and the final 3 are social habits. That means the first 3 are more inside you and the final 3 are more outside you, and that they have others more heavily involved. The last 2 habits especially require others to interact with. Now let's dive into high performance habit 1, seek clarity. In a recent survey I did of my readers, the most requested content topic was building a niche. Finding your niche and Burchard's first habit of clarity are very similar. Both of them require testing different areas to see if they fit you. Here's a quote from High Performance Habits. You generate clarity by asking questions, researching, trying new things, sorting through life's opportunities, and sniffing out what's right for you. It's not as though you walk outside one day and the piano of purpose falls on your head and all things become clear. Clarity is the child of careful thought and mindful experimentation. There's no quick fix for a niche that I can give you. Even the book that I wrote to help you find your niche and market to it requires that you spend time in experimentation. You must look at what you've done, what you enjoy, what will people pay for, and a myriad of other factors. Out of all these factors, you have to start the experiment with the niche you have. In a wider productivity space, there's some easier ways to get clarity. My favorite question comes from the one thing, and it is, what is the one thing I can do today, or maybe this week, that will make the rest of my business easier or irrelevant? I regularly modify this question based on circumstances. Sick kid I need to take care of, then the question becomes, what is the one thing I can do in the next hour while the kid naps that will make the rest of my work easier or relevant? Then I only do that one thing. I ignore all other work, no matter what state it's in or expectations that are around it from other people. I just do the one thing. The other big part of clarity is knowing where you want to be, who you want to be. You need to know this so that you can filter the decisions that come your way against where you want to go. In my bootcamp course, we spend the first number of videos working on this single question so that you can build your filtering documents. That way, as you build a business later, we always look back to our filter documents and make sure we're not building a business that precludes all the things we said we wanted. Now here's a quote from Burchard. In almost every basic question of who they were or what they wanted, the highest performers had a great ability to focus on the future and divine how they would achieve excellence. They didn't just know who they were. Indeed, they rarely focused on their present personality preferences. Instead, they consistently thought about who they wanted to be and how to become that. Burchard uses the idea of the future 4, which are self, social, skills, and service. High performers know what they want to be in each of these areas, and they make decisions now that will lead them towards these areas. Decisions about how to spend their time, what projects to take on, what books to read, and what volunteer opportunities to take on. Clarity is all about knowing where you want to go and being willing to say no to some of the short-term opportunities that come your way when they don't fit into your plans. Now that brings us to high performance habit 2, which is generate energy. Let's dive right in with a quote. High performers have magical trifecta of capital E energy. That's a holistic kind that includes positive and enduring mental, physical, and emotional vibrancy. It's the key force that helps them perform better in many areas of their life. You read that above, and you want to be it. A person that comes into a room and just has energy. Now, I'm not talking about some perky, bouncy person. That's a superficial measurement of energy and not what we're talking about here. I'm talking about someone that has the capacity to be present with you because they're not emotionally exhausted. Someone that's relatively healthy and has the energy to do the things they want. That has the ability to focus on the task at hand because they don't let distractions infect their life. To get to this, Burchard gives us 3 practices. I love the first one, which is release tension and set intention. Releasing tension and setting intention is all about breaking the tension between contexts. Have a stressful day at work? Don't bring it home, take it on your kids and your spouse. Burchard recommends something along the lines of taking 5 minutes when you park the car at home. Think about the tension that you have from the day. Just let it go. Then talk to yourself through the type of parent, husband, father, mother, wife, friend you want to be in your house. And set the intention to do that. Ask yourself, what would it look like to be that thing? I've used this idea even as a break between getting angry with one of my children and then setting the intention about the type of parent I want to be. Taking 60 seconds, even when the kid's still yelling at me, has been a hugely helpful reset in my parenting skills. Practice 2 is bring the joy, which is evidently one of Bashard's things. He sells bracelets that have it saying on it. I didn't know this, but I get the sentiment. Here's a quote from Bashard. Positive emotion is a prerequisite for high performance, and only you are in charge of your enduring emotional experience. Remember the lesson from the last chapter. You can choose your feelings, the interpretations you have about the emotions that you sense. And the more you do that, the more you rewire how you experience emotions. You're in charge of how you feel. Blaming others for how you feel is easy. It absolves you of responsibility. It blames them. It also takes away any control or power you have in the situation. If they make you feel angry, you have no control because they made you feel that anger. I actually revised the sentences above earlier in this podcast about my kids with that in mind. They don't make me angry, I respond in anger. If you struggle with joy, take that little computer out of your pocket, your phone, and set a reminder a few times a day. When it goes off, take a second, look around and be joyful for something, for anything. Even if it's the fact that you're inside and it's not raining on you right now. At home, we started a thankful practice at dinners. That means every night we all go around the table and say 3 things we're thankful for. We've also started telling on each other, which means in our family that we tell on our family members when they do something awesome. To dive even more into how happiness is good for us, look at my review of the happiness advantage or wait for it as it comes up in the podcast. Practice 3 is optimize health. Here's a quote from Bashard. Too often achievers blame their low physical energy on how I'm built or on the time demands of their industry, company culture, or personal obligations. Again, this is giving up your control. High performers are way more likely to work out, and they're way more likely to sleep 7 to 8 hours a night. They aren't out there hustling 22 hours a day. When they're working, they focus hard on the task at hand, and they get their work done. Here's a quote from Bashard. One stunning study from our research on over 20,000 high performers is that the top 5% of all high performers are 40% more likely to exercise at least 3 days per week than 95% below them. If you're out of shape, don't blame your work. Take control of the problem. Now, high performance habit 3, raising necessity. And we're going to dive right in with a quote from Bashard. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to show up for life, for work, for your family. You don't have to climb out of bed on a tough day. You don't have to care about being the best you can be. You don't have to strive to live an extraordinary life. And yet, some people feel they have to. Why? Bashard answers this question with necessity. The fact that for some, high performance is something that must happen. There's just no choice about it. Here's a quote from him. High performers often feel the necessity to perform well out of a sense of duty to someone or something beyond themselves. Someone is counting on them, or they're trying to fulfill a promise or responsibility. Now, this necessity can come from your kids, your spouse, supporting an external family member, anything. These obligations are not negative to high performers. They view them as a privilege. It's one of the things that causes a gap in underperformers. Here's a quote on underperformers from Bashard. It's hard for underperformers to see that the obligations are not always a negative thing, which is why we found that underperformers complain more about their responsibilities at work than their high-performing peers. So underperformers lament the requirements and take away their control again. They'll look at work and do it as a must, something they have to do with a chip on their shoulder. Again, there are going to be 3 practices from Bashard to raise your necessity. Practice 1 is know who needs your A game. This question again reminds me so much of the one thing. The question that Bashard wants us to ask is, who needs my A game right now and why do they need my A game? Then do the tasks that bring your A game. I found this most impactful in conjunction with the releasing tension and setting intention exercise from earlier in the book. Asking the question as part of setting intention lets me know who I need to be there for right now. Practice 2 is affirm the why. Here's a quote from Bashard. High performers don't keep their goals or the why behind those goals secret or silent. They confidently affirm their goals to themselves and others. If there is one necessity practice that seems to divide high performers and underperformers the most, it's this one. Underperformers are often unclear about their why, and they don't use affirmations or speak about the whys they do have. Now, this doesn't mean you broadcast your goals for the whole world to know about it. It does mean that you tell those you care about it and those that care about you. This means that you know why you work. If you're struggling with that, Jeff Goins wrote a great book to help you find out this, called The Art of Work. Practice 3 is level up your squad. Here's a quote from Bashard. If you truly want to increase your performance in any area of your life, get around some new people who expect and value high performance. Who's around you? Are they also striving? Are they high performers? I think it's Peter Drucker that has said that we're the product of the 5 people that we hang out with most. What are your top 5 friends producing? If you're not happy with that answer, it's time to level up who you have contact with. That's more than just reaching out to awesome people, though. Awesome people are busy. They got a bunch of requests for the time already. You're going to need to take some steps on your own first so that you're bringing value to the conversation, so that you're worth talking to, really. Here's a quote from Burchard. You want to get around more successful people? Then earn your way into the party by becoming exceptional at what you do. Work hard. You can level up who you hang out with through books as well. Reading the books of those authors you look up to is one of the cheapest ways of getting their consulting. Reading their blogs is even cheaper. Instead of putting on TV, putting it in your head more, what about a book or an excellent documentary? But I like a book even more. Now that concludes the first 3 habits, the personal high performance habits, and brings us to the final 3, the social high performance habits. High performance habit 4 is increased productivity. Oh my goodness. The world of productivity writing, it's huge. Everyone's trying to make their mark on it, including me in some ways. Now, to get more productive, it starts with goals and focus. Here's a quote from Burchard. The fundamentals of becoming more productive are setting goals and maintaining energy and focus. No goals, no focus, no energy, you're dead in the water. But Burchard doesn't stop there. He wants to blow up the notion of work-life balance as a thought about the hours. Instead, he wants us to focus on happiness and harmony. How do we feel about the hours we spend working versus the hours we do other things? Do we have harmony in our life? This also brings into question the meaningfulness of our work. Again, a quote from Burchard. You'll always feel out of balance if you're doing work that you don't find engaging and meaningful. I have a friend that quit his job when the main product became pop-ups. He couldn't abide supporting one of the things that he feels is the bane of the internet. He was performing poorly and realized that while he loved the technology part of his job, he hated the results of his work. His work had negative meaning. To get more productive, Burchard gives us 3 practices we can use. Practice 1 is increase the outputs that matter. Here's a quote from Burchard. High performers have mastered the art of prolific quality output, which he calls PQO. They produce more high quality output than their peers over the long term, and that is how they become more effective, better known, more remembered. They aim their attention and consistent efforts toward PQO and minimize any distractions, including any opportunities that would steal them away from their craft. Now, I actually feel this is easy to say, to do work that matters, but it's hard to know what matters. Back to a quote from Burchard. Figuring out what you're supposed to produce and learning the priorities and the creation, quality, and frequency of that output is one of the greatest breakthroughs you can have in your career. I don't know that I have an answer for you, except maybe look at those that are successful in your field and see what they prioritize. Maybe you don't have the finances to sit and write for 3 hours every morning because you have another job and I don't know, you got to pay some bills. But what if you wrote for an hour every morning instead of just when it fits? What if you contributed to that open source project with testing issues to see if they're real or if they're already fixed? Simply cleaning up something in the issue queue is something of note that will get you noticed by many, even if it's not very glamorous. And here's a quote from Burchard. Whenever I tell people to create more output, inevitably I run into perfectionists. They say things like, well, Brendan, I can't put more stuff out there. I'm a perfectionist. I know that I have to have everything perfect, and then it will be loved. Perfectionism, though, is just a delay logic fancied up to look respectable. The reason people don't finish more things isn't perfectionism, it's that they are rarely even begin or they get tangled up in doubt or distraction. Remember, you won't ever be ready. Just start. Don't worry about perfection. Start shipping. Practice 2 is chart your 5 moves. Quote from Burchard. A lot of highly driven people think they don't need well-defined plans. They have talent, so they just want to get in the game, hustle, wing it, and see what happens. That might work when they're starting out and everyone on the field around them is also uninformed. Instead of hustle, what if you had the 5 moves you need to make happen to achieve your goal? Not sure what the 5 moves are? I bet you're lying. At least about the first 2. Here's a quote from Burchard. If there are only 5 major moves to make the goal happen, what would they be? So if you want to be a core contributor to WordPress as an example, which is the software platform I use, then move 1 is to start contributing in some fashion. If you want to be a writer, then you better start writing. If you want to draw. Go as far as you can see and then start researching the next moves to go further. Block out and protect the time you need for these moves. Here's a quote from Burchard. It doesn't matter whether you know how to achieve your 5 moves at first. The important thing is that for every major goal you have, you figure out the 5 moves. If you don't know the moves, then you lose. Practice 3 is get insanely good at key skills. Here's a quote from Burchard. To become more productive, become more competent, you have to master the primary skills needed to win in your primary fields of interest. This ties in really tightly with your first 5 moves. You need to be good at the core skills that are required for your field. You need to become a master, which means putting in the time and the practice to become one. I wrote a whole book on this called Becoming a Master, and there'll be a link to that in the show notes. High performance habit 5 is develop influence. Again, jumping right back into a quote from Burchard here. One reason people struggle to gain influence in their personal and professional lives is that they simply don't ask for what they want. This is in part because people drastically underestimate the willingness of others to help and engage. I was recently talking to a friend that lives on the other side of Canada. He was sick and his family needed help. Kids needed to get places and groceries needed to get purchased. He was amazed how many people showed up to help his family when he just asked. At times, they had to start turning people away for bringing food by because they didn't have space in their fridge or freezer. No one has to get paid back. Ask for help, people are going to show up. And this is also the idea of perfectionism, that we need to portray our perfect life, which doesn't require any help. Here's a quote from Burchard. Most people aren't thinking about you at all. And even when you put yourself in front of them to make a request and they say no, within minutes, they're right back to not thinking about you. They're too busy dealing with their own life. You're not as important as you think. This is totally fine. It frees you up to do more awesome stuff without worrying about what other people think. They have way too much of their own stuff to deal with without worrying about you. Now, there are 3 practices here again that Burchard has seen work to try and gain influence. First is teach people how to think about themselves, help them build a growth mindset and develop grit in the midst of their struggles. Practice 2 is challenging people to grow. Here's a quote from Burchard. High performers challenge people around them to rise to higher levels of performance themselves. If you could follow them around as they consistently challenge others to raise the bar, they push people to get better and they don't apologize for it. Call people to a stronger character. Help them have more empathy in their relationships. Teach people to invest deeper and understand before they try to convince people that they're right. Finally, contribution. Help people bring more value in their relationships. Not just business, but helping them show up with their A game for everyone. Practice 3 is role model the way. This is all about being a model. If you want teamwork, then you need to be someone that works with your team. If you want your kids to read more, not be on their screens, they better see you reading more, not on your screen. This is not manipulating because that's going to kill you in the long term. Here's a quote from the book. It is possible to get ahead in life by manipulating others. You betcha. For the short term, but ultimately manipulators burn all bridges and find themselves disconnected, unsupported, alone. They find no long-term success with relationships or their own well-being. We smell frauds, or at least we smell something funky, and eventually figure out where the smell is coming from, and we run away from it. What type of role model are you today? Now, high performance habit 6, demonstrate courage. Courage is not having no fear. In fact, it's acting in the face of fear. You can only have courage if you're facing things that frighten you. That means practice 1 is honor the struggle. Here's a quote from the book. We're less courageous as a society today because we avoid struggle, and that decision leaves us with underdeveloped character and strength, 2 key ingredients for courage. Now, this echoes Mark Manson again, which we talked about earlier. I'm not going to repeat the quote because it's at the beginning, but we only show the awesome stuff we do. Even those being real posts we see on social media often come across as very surface. They come across as a veiled attempt to be alternative and show some barely existent struggles to your following. But we need to honor struggle. We need to embrace the hard times and realize that as we go through them, others are as well. This is where asking for help can reap rewards. Others can step up, share your fears, and help you through them. Practice 2 is sharing your truth and ambitions. Here's a quote from the book. If you believe in your dream, stay on your path. You need no permission beyond that of the tingling hope in your soul. These quotes always feel maybe a little hollow to me. It's easy to say, follow your truth for that successful coach, speaker, author person. They aren't faced day in, day out with bills to pay that aren't currently paid by tingling hope. I actually like a lot more how Seth Godin addresses this in The Dip. He says to ask yourself 3 questions. First is, am I panicking? And it's really not that bad. I'm just freaking out right now. Number 2 is, who am I trying to influence? And can I reach a bigger audience? Am I being too narrow with who I'm trying to influence? And 3, is there any measurable progress? Did I sign 1 extra client this month? So maybe I'm not paying everything. I still am working to switch over, but I'm having more people interested. That's a measurable progress. Going through these questions feels honest to me in a way that find your truth and live it just never does. You can actually find a link to my full review of The Dip in the show notes, or wait, it's going to come up in the podcast as well. Practice 3 is finding someone to fight for. It goes back to raising necessity. And who are we fighting for? What compels us to work? Look at those people around you. Get courageous and take risks to win for them. Now, the habits are out of the way, but Burchard is going to give us a short section on dealing with 3 traps that can come as you start to be a high performer. Trap 1 is superiority. Here's a quote from the book. When you're succeeding beyond others, it's easy to get a big head. You begin to think you're special, separate from, better than, or more important than other people. Now, if it's lonely at the top for you, then find someone ahead of you and get their help, because there's always someone better than you. Another quote from the book. Everyone can win at life, so let's be honest. You were once a mess too. Or did you forget already? But you improved. give others the same opportunity. That means that you need to find someone that's a mess, like you were, maybe like you are, and mentor them to be a high performer. Only need to be one step ahead of them to be able to bring value to their life. Trap 2 is dissatisfaction. Here's a quote from the book. Those who are never satisfied are never at peace. They can't tune into their zone. The noise of a dissatisfied mind prevents them from finding a rhythm that makes them feel alive and effective. Don't settle for less, but be happy with the way things are now. It's okay to enjoy where you're at and the journey on the way. If you're not happy now, getting a few more zeros in your bank account will do nothing to change your happiness. More money mostly just magnifies who you are. Don't fool yourself into thinking that you'll suddenly be a better person. It's just not going to happen. You'll be the same person you are now with more money. Trap 3 is neglect. This is one of the spots that I hate. Working hard to get success and finding you're divorced and your kids hate you. The whole time you thought you were working towards something awesome for them too, maybe. But you weren't. Your wife wants dates. Kids want you to build Lego and build blanket forts with them. Burchard proposes 2 ways that neglect happens. First, obliviousness. You're so focused on one part of life that you miss the rest of it. And 2 is overreaching, which is an insatiable desire for more with an unrealistic sense of what's possible in this short amount of time. Don't go too fast in too many directions, people. Here's a final quote from the book before we jump into the recommendation. Cramming your day so full that you have no time for thought or rejuvenation just makes you tired and irritable. No one credits fatigue and a bad mood for their world-class performance. This is a good quote to remember. Put it up on your wall. Finally, should you read High Performance Habits by Brendon Burchard? Now, some parts of High Performance Habits may be covered in more detail in other books, but Burchard offers you a great starting place if you're looking to dive into being a high performer. Not only is there research, but it gives you actions to take, practices to do in each chapter as you start your journey towards high performance. Yes, High Performance Habits from Brendon Burchard is a worthy read. But if you take his HP6 survey from the beginning of the book, where he links to it, and you have to submit an email, get ready for a million emails. It was useful to look at this survey, but boy, his email marketing is a killer. It's going to fill up your inbox. So do the survey, then unsubscribe. Thanks for listening to Should You Read It? To support the show, you can leave me a review in iTunes or heart or a star in whatever podcast player you use. These help more people find the show. If you want to get more reading done, you should also look at an Audible membership. If you get one using curtismchale.ca/recommends/audible, that will support the production of the show financially. In our next episode, episode 10, we're going to take another look at agile development practices by working through Scrum by Jeff Sutherland.